Today, Tesla announced their next generation vehicle, which will be 50% the cost of the current Model 3. Think about what that means. Tesla's making a step change improvement to cut their cost by 50%. And we costed a Model 3. And you remember what it cost when we costed it? $35,000.
$35,000, yeah.
That's what our should cost was. And in 2022, Elon Musk said the cost of their Tesla Model 3 was about $35,000.
Right.
So we predicted what it should cost Tesla to build their Model 3 back in 2018. 50% of $35,000 is what? About 17 grand, 17.5.
Yeah. Yep.
You can sell a $25,000 vehicle if it costs $17,500 to build.
And make more money than everybody else. Because at the end of the day, no one on the planet makes more money per car than Tesla. I think that in probably about 3 years, maybe less, your shares, based on what I saw, are going to be worth about $1,000 each. No problem. No problem. Yeah.
How much margin reduction did you see by hearing the whole presentation, which was designed to tell us how they're doing operation efficiency? Do you think that it's going to actually reduce margins this year? Or like everybody said, oh, that's like 3 years from now. That's a year, 5 years from now.
They said 50%, and I believe it.
When?
I believe next year. So at the end of the day, everybody's saying, "Oh, Tesla won't make any money." Oh yeah, right. Tell me another. They're going to make tons of money. I'm telling you flat, and they're going to just gobble the market. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be a couple of early adopter OEMs to jump into the affray with Tesla charging stations. And those guys are going to survive, and the rest are going to be fucked. And that's all there is to it.
We just talked about costs going down, from 35 to 17,500, which is incredible. And this is just a general question. Do you see, with the reduction of the sales price that Tesla has announced, do you think that their gross margins will hold up with the cost of the car coming down and the efficiencies they made in the new factories? Do you see the gross margins holding up where they were last year? Or do you see more of a dent in those margins? I would love to know that.
When you drop the price by 30%, and that's kind of like the number that I've got stuck in my mind. I can't remember anybody's name, but I do remember numbers and I do remember designs. And I think that what they said was they're decreasing the cost of the Model 3 and the Model Y by about 30%. When you decrease the the cost by 30%, and then you come back and you say to the general buying public, hey, you know what? We'll toss you a bone, and it's still going to be more than everybody else. It's still going to be 30%. I mean,
you want to be a naysayer? Go ahead. Go and be a Hindenburg. I don't give a rat's ass. At the end of the day, eventually you're always going to lose. Always, because, especially if you're betting against Elon Musk. Don't do it.
I feel like for the first 3 to 5 years of their existence, they were just trying to show the world, I say 3 to 10 years of their existence, they were trying to show the world that they can do it, particularly when they were trying to produce the Model 3. I think they pushed them out to the market a little early when they had the fit and finish issues.
Yeah.
But now they're kind of hitting their stride.
Yeah.
1.3 million vehicles last year, on pace for probably 2 million this year. Developing a whole new architecture will allow them to hit all sorts of new markets, particularly the low end. They could have just said, hey, we're going to go after large SUVs next, which would be a highly profitable endeavor, but they're focused on the world, because if they're building in Mexico, I believe that plant is going to produce for other regions. If you can produce that low-cost car and sell in South America or Mexico itself.
Well, I look at it this way: the plant's going to be the same size as the existing plant that they've got in Texas. If it's the same size and you're making a smaller vehicle, it'll have less options and it'll have less parts. Guess what? It's going to be
a couple million.
Yeah, right? I'm thinking 2.5, maybe even 3 million out of that plant.
75% reduction in silicon carbide, and roughly $1,000 cost for the drive unit.
Yeah.
$1,000 cost. Now imagine you are a tier 1 supplier and you supply drive units, gearboxes, motors, inverters, and you're charging $2,000, $2,500, $3,500, yeah,
average
for a unit.
Right.
And now Tesla just said it's going to cost us $1,000. Now, when you walk into another OEM and try and sell your $2,000 unit, they're going to say, hey, how can Tesla make it for $1,000? So this would be one of the hottest motor teardowns ever.
Yeah.
So we specialize in tearing down these drive units. We'll get one eventually.
Yeah.
We'll tear it down and we'll verify whether it's $900, $1,100, $1,300.
Right.
But that's big news.
Well, the big thing is, if we put this into context, I mentioned before that I worked with pretty much every car company on the planet. One of the guys that really impressed me was E.G. Toyota. And that was the grandfather of the guy that just got removed. And he said something that I wrote down, and I use it all the time. Our current success is the best reason to change. We have to be permanently dissatisfied in order to get better and better and keep ahead of the competition. This is a good example of the old Toyota's approach to getting the job done. Permanent dissatisfaction. They're always looking to try and get better. And that brings us to the next one, which I was totally blown away at. This is a 4680 battery. This one is a wet cell. I can guarantee you that because we've taken them apart and they're not anything.
There's electrolyte in it.
It's electrolyte in it. But what we looked at was a dry cell. And unfortunately, we weren't allowed to take pictures. But picture something that's about 1 meter in diameter and about 2 meters in length. So 3 by 6, 3 feet by 6 feet. And here's the deal. How many bands did they have? 1, 2.
So they had 8 bands.
8 bands.
But what
yeah.
they do is they slit it in the middle. And
Right.
They slit it in the middle of the
Right.
powder, and they make 16.
But it's dry. There's no electrolyte used. So here's the thing. Or the electrolyte
Wait, hang on.
is.
It's a dry process
Yeah.
to form the cathode and the anode.
Right.
They all have electrolyte. Let's get, so
Yeah, it has an electrolyte, but everybody else is using something that requires you to boil away a solvent that really isn't good for the environment. These guys have figured out how to compress it and put it together. Now, by accident, or maybe it was another Easter egg for us, we found out what they use. And so we're going to try and back that into how does that process work. We'll try and make that happen in the future. But watching how they put it together, the difference between one basic unit that does all the spooling and whatnot versus a factory, a huge factory full of equipment with chemical reprocessing and everything else. It's mind blowing. The footprint alone between the two is like the difference between a football
Yeah.
field and some kid playing hopscotch. That's the difference. We're looking at a huge amount of change to go to the new 4680. You know what? Look at this from a form factor standpoint. If I lose one of these, okay, I lost 3 volts. But if I lose one of these, I lose a brick that's about that size. And guess what? If this thing starts on fire,
it propagates.
It propagates. It's going to go as big as it can, and it's going to go through that module. I don't understand this. I can't imagine why anyone would take the risk.
Yeah. If you look at this Rivian cell, Rivian buys this cell. And if you buy it, that means you're paying a profit margin to that supplier. That supplier exists and makes profit because that's how companies exist. So if Tesla's making their own cell, where does that profit cost go? It's eliminated. It's
Right.
passed on all the way up through the vehicle. So the more vertical integration you have, and the most expensive part of the car is the battery. So they just wiped out one of the largest pieces of profit loss by doing it themselves.
Here's the deal. If you can make them yourself, and you can control the process yourself, and you can basically come up with new formulation of what goes into this yourself, you're going to lead the parade. Everybody else that's going in this direction, you're buying chemistry from somebody that is giving you a lot of smoke. You're out of your mind.
Next thing I want to talk about, Sandy, which I thought was the biggest announcement of the entire event, was a slide that they showed was how many electrical modules were owned and controlled by Tesla over the various models over the course of development. And it showed the Model 3 and the Model Y, and I might get this slightly wrong, but it was somewhere in the 50% of the modules were owned by Tesla on the Model 3, and it was 60 or 61% on the Model Y. The Cybertruck was 85%. And when we buy modules, these are electric modules that do all the important things, whether that's your liftgate control, your door modules, your body controller, all the little things throughout the car, ADAS, the controller for the infotainment. 85% on the Cybertruck will be owned by Tesla, but they said the next generation vehicle, 100%. And the reason why that's important is it can minimize the wiring length, this is what they talked about, but I think it's more important for changeover to 48 volt architecture. Because the entire supply base has been 12 volts for decades and decades and decades.
Forever. Ever since they put a starter into the car, or sorry, let me rephrase that, a battery into a car. It's been a 12 volt battery.
Yeah, and let's not mistake this with other 48 volt mild hybrid systems which have been deployed over the last decade and a half. Those are typically used only for belt start generators and then high amperage systems like high amperage steering racks or maybe a brake by wire, which are going to draw a lot of current and amperage. So those were just 2 or 3 or 4 systems were ran by 48 volts, but the rest of the car, your door locks, your switches, your lights, or your HVAC, which draws less amperage, but some, still all 12 volts. So now imagine this. We are at a point in 2023 where the entire car industry is 12 volts. We can look back at this video in maybe 15, 25 years, and the entire auto industry most likely will have shifted to 48 volts.
I'll bet you it's faster than that. I'd say that if we look at...
this is everyone else.
I'm telling you, I think it's going to happen a lot faster. All they need... Look, we talked about the castings, those wherever the hell that thing is, for 10, 12, 14 years. Nobody went for it until Tesla did. These guys came out with this, this big casting here and talked about the other castings that are coming down. And 2 years, like in basically 2 years, Hydra's got a shitload of new orders. I guarantee you, everybody on the planet, I can carry, I think right now, all the guys that do all the solenoids and all the 12 volt whatever stuff, they're sitting there going, and they're going to make the switch. Because there's another thing you should know too. Let's look at these two. I want something a little more dramatic. Let's look at these two. That would be the wire size for 48 volts. This is the wire size for 12 volts. I need more wire. It gets heavier. Every time you move to a slightly higher amount of voltage, that's what pushes the amperage through, you can get away with a smaller wire size. Think about it. Okay, now these wires are normally really tiny. I could never show you because they are tiny. But any time that you can reduce the size of anything and reduce the weight of anything, you're going to get more range. The 48 volt system has been talked about since I joined Ford Motor Company in 1978. And nobody did anything about it. Oh, we can't get the suppliers to move on that.
Yeah. And the reason you get more range is not because you're not going to reduce the amperage and current needs of whatever you're doing. If you're steering the car, you're going to need the same amount of amperage. So if you jack the voltage up, the wire size drops. So the cost and the weight of the wires drop. So now here's how this actually makes a difference. If you can cut out 15 to 25 kilograms of copper out of the car, now the vehicle weighs less. So if the vehicle weighs less, it has a cascading effect. Now the amount of effort needed in that steering rack drops by maybe 0.5%. The whole vehicle benefits from it. Now the vehicle's lighter, so you can get more range with slightly less batteries. Now you have slightly less batteries. So in order to truly make a next-gen vehicle that's low cost, you have to do everything the best way possible. And Tesla decided that they're going to forego the entire supply base and said, we are developing automobiles the way they should be developed. We're not relying on the vestigial past of 12 volts.